It's two different, and the endocrine gland system and the nervous system, because there are three different layers. And so we'll be touching the pituitary area, as we say, our Father, Mother, God, or our Creator, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, forgive us, etc. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. So that's what we're going to do right now. So just everybody, just get quiet in yourself. Take a nice breath and relax as you exhale a couple of times. Tune in to the creation. Our Father, Mother God, who art in heaven,
hallowed be thy name.
thy kingdom come,
Thy will be done
on earth
as
as
it
it is in heaven.
Give
Give
us
Give us this day
daily
bread.
bread.
daily bread,
Give us
and forgive us our trespasses,
As
we forgive those
those who trespass against us.
and
lead
lead
us.
Lead us not to temptation,
but
deliver
deliver us from evil.
For thine
Thine
is
is
the
Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory.
kingdom, now and forever. Amen.
Right. In addition to myself and Francis, present with us today is Ruth.
Hello, Ruth.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I'm great.
And Jim.
Hello, Jim.
How are you?
Nice to meet you guys virtually.
And Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Hey.
And Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
And Mitzi.
Hi, Mitzi. Oh, big kisses to you too.
And Dawn.
Hello. Hi, Dawn.
And on Zoom at the top left is Larry.
Hello, this is Larry.
Oh, hi, Larry.
And
I like your hat.
in the middle,
Thank
that's
you.
us. The top right is Susan.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Susan. Hello, Susan.
Hi.
The bottom left is Mary.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Mary.
And in the bottom left corner is Anne Marie.
Hi.
Hi,
So-
Anne Marie. I
We're a
think we
good
got
group.
your picture for Susan, Mary, and Anne Marie. I got you all 3 times.
All right. We all, after introductions, we have an opportunity to share. If anybody has anything important you'd like to share with the group, now would be the time to do it. And let me ask if there's anybody on Zoom first.
I would like to say hello.
Hello, go ahead. Speak up.
Oh, sorry.
I can hear you.
Well,
I can hear you.
No, I just wanted to say that I listened to Barbara's interview on Anthony Cheney on YouTube,
Uh-huh.
and I thought it was the most wonderful, well-spoken, inspiring, very good story.
Thank you so much. He's the darling French man that lives down in the south of France, and he and his girlfriend came over to our house. So I adopted him. My husband and I are now his extra parents in Santa Barbara, and he's an adorable guy. He's done a lot of the YouTube podcasts with a lot of the experiencers. I've given him the contacts for all of my friends who are experiencers. So he's done quite a few. Yeah, wonderful guy.
Nice.
Right. Are there others who would have something to share? Someone here in the room, perhaps. Francis has something. Let me put the camera on Francis.
Okay. Hi, Francis.
Personal thing. Susan Lindvay and I worked together on Venture Inward magazine for many years. She's a very dear friend and an expert in the Casey readings.
Oh, wonderful.
Good to see you again, Susan.
Thank you. That's very nice of you.
Do you both know Neil and Fania Helm?
Not not very personally, but I've heard them speak and I know who they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
They brought me to the Edgar Casey location to speak years ago. So I actually did a talk at the Edgar Casey location there in Virginia Beach.
Oh, what year
Yeah.
was that?
Oh, I have no idea.
Many
I've done
years ago.
so many of them.
No, that's okay.
I know Neil and Fania, and Neil, Fania gave both Mitzi and I regression a couple of
Oh,
years ago.
wonderful. Wonderful. Isn't that amazing? Did you have a wonderful experience?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw that we were together in other lifetimes.
Oh, that's amazing. I have a person on my board of directors for my IONS group here in Santa Barbara, and he was trained by the Monroe Institute. He's one of the 30 people in the United States that is certified to do the past life regressions. And when he did that on me, I literally, it was as big and as beautiful as my near-death experience. It was so amazing. I saw myself in Africa as a small child, and slave traders came into my village, and I was taken. And I ended up in the deep South, and I ended up with a white family. And it was just the most amazing thing to see how that reflects how I look at things in this current life. I've always been the person who walked up to kids that were brand new in school in my elementary school, and they were of color. Maybe they were Asian, or they were Mexican, or they were Black. And I would say, "Hi, my name's Barbie. I want to be friends." And so no one ever understood why I did that. And it was because of that particular past life experience of having been a Black child. Yes. So that was very cool.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really an important concept. And many people have no idea about other lifetimes.
Yes.
And for you to
True.
be
And
able to see your own and know how it relates to this life is really it.
yes. Oh, it's amazing.
All right. Anyone else in this room have something to share? Anybody on Zoom have something you'd like to share? All right, then I'd like to
Okay.
program over to Barbara, who has some interesting stories and let's put the speaker. Let's see if I can I'm going to mute everybody except for Barbara. Go ahead, take it away, Barb.
Hello, everyone. So you might have seen one of my podcasts. I've done a bunch of them. Jeff Mara is also a really good person who does a really great podcast. So look at Anthony Cheen's or Jeff Mara's if you want to show anyone else and help them to grasp what you got from it. I was raised early on in Salem, Oregon, and I ended up down in Santa Barbara, California, because a person met me up in Oregon and encouraged me to get married to him and move to Santa Barbara. And I thought it was going to be a delightful new adventure in my life, but it turned out to be the worst possible adventure. And he was very controlling, manipulative, abusive, angry, and he was an engineer here in Santa Barbara, and I was trapped. And I had a police officer mom that if I had told her what was happening, she probably would have come down and shot him. But I didn't tell her anything. And I was young in my life. I was in my early mid 20s when I got married to him. And it ended up that after a number of years of trying to do everything his way and trying to be, exactly what he needed me to be. He ended up rupturing my spinal by my L5S1 spinal disc in my spine. He ended up rupturing that. So I ended up at the hospital, and he didn't go with me to the doctor or anything. And the first doctor told me that I would never walk again. And that was pretty scary at 31 years old. I had just had a 5-month-old baby daughter and an 8-year-old son. And so I was pretty worried about that. And they ended up scheduling surgery for me. Another doctor, I went to see a neurosurgeon, and he said he could fix it. He was kind of cocky, and he He is known around Santa Barbara for his cocky, bad bedside manner, but he is a good neurosurgeon. So I ended up going to him and going to the hospital on the day that they told me to in December of 1987. And I was going to have a myelogram the night before the surgery, and they put me on an x-ray table. I wasn't under any anesthesia or anything. They were just going to inject iodine dye into my spinal cord at the back of my neck and then tip the x-ray table so the spinal cord could allow the flow of the iodine down my spine to see if when the disc blew, if it had chipped my spine, my spinal cord, because if it was leaking spinal fluid, then that was going to be a bigger problem. So they had me on the table, they injected the dye, they told me I had to hold very still or else I could have headaches for months afterwards, and definitely didn't need headaches with all of the other issues that I had with him, with the husband. And so I laid there and did exactly what I was told to do, and they started tipping the table. And unfortunately, the x-ray tech, and I think this was actually a God thing, because if I had not had that NDE, I don't know what my future would have been. I knew that the husband that I was married to had purchased a whole bunch of life insurance on me. And I had a sneaky feeling that there was going to be an end to me in some way, because he would work on my car and stuff. And I thought about him cutting my brake lines or, something to cause me to die. And so I was in a very traumatic situation down in Santa Barbara. And the table started tipping. The x-ray techs started talking to each other about their weekend plans. And no one, not the neurosurgeon or the orthopedic surgeon who were in the room, nor the nurse that was at the far table by the door, was watching the x-ray table. And the x-ray tech was pushing the wrong button. So he was lowering my head instead of raising it. So my feet were going up and my head was going down, and the dye they just injected into the back of my neck was going into my brain. And it only took about maybe 10 seconds before I realized something was wrong. And I started feeling like I was going to faint. And I thought, is this how I'm supposed to feel? I'd never had this happen before and didn't know what to expect. And I waited until about a minute had passed before I realized, okay, I am definitely going to faint, and this probably isn't okay, and I need to tell them. So I wanted to say something, and I literally could not speak, nor could I lift my hand to touch the guy that was standing next to the table. I was just stuck in my body without any capacity to move it or anything. The dye had done something with the pressure inside my brain, and I couldn't do anything. And I was panicking at that time. My eyes started rolling to the back of my head, and I was fighting to try to keep them forward, to try to have somebody look at me so they could see that something was wrong, but nobody was paying any attention to the patient. And then at about a minute and a half in, after I'd gotten the table tipped, I started hyperventilating, and my fast breathing made the guy who was standing next to the table realize something was happening. So he stopped talking to the guy and he leaned over my face and looked at my face, and my eyes were rolling backwards and I was hyperventilating. And the last thing that I saw before I died was he leaned back and he looked to see where his thumb was, and he made this god awful face like, and so he then, that was all I saw. So my eyes shut, and in the next second, my eyes opened and I was up on the ceiling, and it felt like my head was up there, and I didn't feel my body, but I felt the ceiling against the back of my head, but I didn't have a head up there. I was looking straight down at my body, and he was calling code blue. And so I calmly, up there, I felt completely calm. I'd been panicked down below, but I felt beautifully calm. And I said, if I'm up here and my body's down there and he's calling code blue, then I think I just died. And right when I said that, I realized there was someone next to me. And it felt so, oh, beautiful. And it felt like I had been connected to that being long before I was ever on earth. And so I just immediately assumed it was God. And so I said to him, please, I need to go back into my life. If I leave my children in this way at this time, they won't grow up to be the good human beings they're capable of being. They'll be abused. Please, I need to go back to protect them and love them. And so I said that, and about 4 different times, as I watched what was going on down below, they brought in an oxygen cart. The 2 guys before the oxygen cart came in were doing chest compressions and blowing in my mouth, doing CPR. And when the oxygen cart came in, they just started doing the chest compressions every 2 minutes, switching, but they weren't blowing in my mouth anymore. And they brought in, this woman brought in an oxygen cart. That was the oxygen cart. Then a man brought in a heart monitor, and I watched the flat line of the heart monitor going across. At first, I didn't know what it was, but then after about 2 1/3 passes of the little dot going along the straight line, I realized, oh, I think that's my heart supposed to be going up and down. So I was really a nerd because I never watched TV, and I wasn't a TV person. I was just always out in the world doing positive things and helping people. And so that was kind of who I was all the way to my early childhood. And so I was watching all this happening from up above, and then the being ended up, the neurosurgeon said to the orthopedic surgeon, too much time has passed. She's going to be brain dead. We need to do something. And the orthopedic surgeon stepped over by the table. He took 2 steps forward and he said, stand clear. And everybody by the table that I was laying on stepped backwards. And he took his fist from behind his back and he pounded my chest. I had never seen that before. I watched my body respond to that blow. And up on the ceiling, I stayed, up there watching, and nothing happened to me going back into my body. But up on the ceiling, then the being finally spoke to me. And it was this beautiful voice that was so filled with love and incredible compassion and kindness. And I just, it was so amazing. And it said, but if you go back, you'll still be in your marriage. What will you do? And then showed me these film clips that just went flash, 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 flash. And it was all these incidents that my husband had hit me, kicked me, pushed me, shoved me, slammed me against the wall, did everything that he had done. And so I saw all that, and then I was given time to think about what I wanted to do. Did I want to stay there where I was safe with him? Did I want to go back to protect my children? So I thought about all the things that I had done to try to help my husband change. Nothing had ever worked. He would always apologize after he hit me, kicked me, pushed me, shoved me. And maybe he'd take me out to dinner, or he'd buy me flowers or some other thing, but the event would happen again. And he would say, I'll never do it again. I'm so sorry. But he would then do it again. The next time he was angry, he couldn't help himself. And so after a marriage family therapist, a pastor with our church, I left him for a year and told him when he got counseling and he corrected the situation, I would consider coming back. And he lied to me and told me he'd gotten counseling, he'd resolved the issues. It was from his childhood with his father who had been abusive. And so
Peaches,
go.
go.
Go ahead. Oh, something happened with the picture, but I'm not sure what. Well, I'll keep talking until you tell me to stop. So what ended up happening was that I went back into my body and I said, what just happened, into the oxygen mask. After that second blow to my chest, it restarted my heart and I went back into my body. And I knew everything that had happened up above. I had watched everything that had happened down below. And I said, startled, what just happened? And the um, nurse that was standing next to the table said, stop, don't talk. We need to stabilize you. And so then for 20 minutes, they did whatever they had to do. And then they finally took the oxygen mask off. And I looked at everyone and I said, what just happened? I was up on the ceiling the whole time and I could see and hear everything. And the neurosurgeon standing next to the table went, oh, brother. And then I said, no, I was. She was on the phone calling for the defib unit saying stat a lot. And that lady brought in the oxygen card. And before that, these two guys were doing CPR. But when the oxygen mask was on my face, they just switched off every 2 minutes doing chest compressions. And that man brought in the heart monitor. And I watched my own flatline. And you said to him too much time had passed, that I was going to be brain dead. And then he struck my chest twice and I came back. And the neurosurgeon, while I was talking, clenched his fists really tightly right next to his waist, pulled them up next to his waist, and then he just screamed, I'm not going to stand here and listen to this. And he stormed out of the room. I think I scared him. And then the orthopedic surgeon, he took my hand and he was next to the table too. And he said, tell me what did you see? Okay, what did it feel like? What did you feel like? Tell me, and he was asking me all these questions and I was answering them. And then after he was done, they put me on a gurney, sent me up to my room, and they did the surgery the next day. And no one in the hospital, no matter who I asked, would answer any question about what happened during that event. So they would look at my chart and go, I don't see anything on here. On when the doctor came in after the surgery the next day, both the doctors came into my recovery area. When I said, what happened last night during my myelogram, the neurosurgeon went, I am not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about your surgery. So I got pretty shut down and didn't know what to think. I'd never heard of a near-death experience before. I'd never meditated. I didn't know about going out of your body. I had no interest or understanding of any of that. And so I ended up keeping quiet for about 12 years. And I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell anyone. I ended up getting rid of the ex-husband, and thank God survived that. And 2 years later, I married a new person that I met. And what I did during those 2 years was quite interesting because God helped all the way through that too. So for the first year, I didn't want to date anybody. I was going through a divorce and a child custody fight, and I just focused on my children and just tried to keep them as happy as I could keep them. And then after a year, I thought, well, now I'm, 32 years old. I probably am going to get married again, but I don't want to date anybody that I don't, know the character traits of. So I better make a list of character traits, good ones, that I can check any person that I date and make sure that they have those character traits. So I started a list, and after a whole year, I had 116 things on the list: patience, empathy, kindness, friendship, honesty, all the different things that I would want. But one funny one was I had dated a boy in college that had a crush on me, and my girlfriend said, oh, you need to go to a dance with him. He's so cute and he has a big crush on you. And I thought, oh, he's shorter than me. I don't want to date him. I want somebody taller. And so I went ahead and went to the dance with him, and during a slow dance, he laid his head on my shoulder while we were slow dancing, which is really hard for a 5'9" girl to have a guy like, oh, it didn't work for me. So I ended up putting on that list, I put must be tall, exclamation point. So every night when I would look at that list, probably 5 to 6 nights a week, I would look through all the character traits and try to think of other ones that I wanted. And I would say, God, I would send up a prayer and I'd say, God, I don't know who this person is, but I know that you do. And if you could bring him to me, in the right way so that I can check to make sure he's these character traits and in the right timing for his life and for my life, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you and good night. So I'd put the little book aside, and the next night I'd look through them again and memorize the character traits and then say my prayer and go to sleep. Well, a year after I had started that list, my son came in one Saturday and he had a girl with him from 7th grade. He was in 8th grade. And he said, Mom, this is Erin. She lives in the neighborhood and we want to go to a movie together. Will you take us? And so after they convinced me to take them, they told me to come around the corner to the house with the white house with the blue trim, and they would be there and I could pick them up over there. So I walked around the corner 15 minutes later and knocked on the front door. And this person opened the front door, who I am now married to. He's 7 feet tall and he matches all of the character traits 34 years later. And I could take him on dates with the children and check him out to make sure that he was kind, patient, and that he treated my children just as beautifully as he treated his children. And so we ended up getting married 6 months to the day from the day we met, from the children got us together. And then now it's been 34 years. So that's a beautiful, beautiful. Understand that when you send those prayers up to God, He can hear you and He can answer those prayers in a beautiful way that you never expected. So that was a pretty special moment in my life. Another one was about 2016 when I had done 5 talks up at San Francisco. And we were driving back from San Francisco to Santa Barbara, and my husband was driving our Toyota van. And I was laying backwards in my passenger seat side, and I was, just looking out the window at the moon and the stars. And, we're only about a half an hour north of Santa Barbara now. It's a 5.5 hour drive, so it's pretty long to San Francisco. And so I was thankful for, almost being home. And we came through this pass that has the 101 freeway that it hits the ocean and then it turns left and goes down towards Santa Barbara. It's called Gaviota. It's where the big oil spill happened years and years ago. And so we were driving through this pass and it was very windy. And we turned the corner and went down towards the ocean, down along the ocean, and very windy. And all of a sudden, this big gust of wind hits the side of the van, and I watch my husband's hands on the steering wheel trying to stay under control. He was just shaking the steering wheel with gripping it tightly and just trying to stay under control. And when that big gust passed, I then said to him, Victor, I think that we shouldn't do 65 miles an hour with this wind like this. I think we should slow down to 50. And he said, yeah, I think so too. So he slowed down to 50 and we're going along. And the ocean's on the right-hand side of the car and I'm on the right-hand side and I'm just looking again out there and it's gusting, but it's not, terrible. And all of a sudden, this little voice in my ear on the right side of the car says, danger, big impact ahead. Danger, big impact. And I was like, and so I sat up and I put my seat back up and I made sure my seatbelt was nice and tight and I was all secure. And then I turned and looked at Victor and I said, you know how I sometimes hear from the other side? And he said, yes. And I said, I just heard danger, big impact ahead, danger, big impact. And so something bad is up ahead. I don't know if it's a car that's turned over or if it's a tree that's blown down, but we need to have stopping time. We need to slow down further. We need to do 30 miles an hour. And Victor looked at me and said, Barbara, we're on the freeway. We can't do 30 miles an hour. So I turned and looked in the back of our van through the back window and I looked in front of us and I said, Victor, there are no cars anywhere near us. There's nobody behind us and nobody in front of us. Nobody's going to care if we're doing 30 miles an hour. And it's only 2 lanes going towards Santa Barbara and 2 different lanes on a freeway going north away from Santa Barbara. So we didn't have any car lights in our faces and there's no lights up there on the freeway. There's no street lights or anything. And so no cars, no, it's very dark. So Victor says, okay, all right. And I said, if somebody, you see somebody coming from behind us, then just go ahead and speed up to what you feel is comfortable until they pass us, but then slow down again because we need to have stopping time. And he said, okay, I can do that. So we're going along for about 10 minutes, going 30 miles an hour. We come around a bend in the highway, and way up in the distance is a single police car with its lights going on around. And I think all of a sudden it hits me in my chest. That's where the danger is. And so I was looking through the windshield trying to see what is the danger? What is the danger? And Victor's driving 30 miles an hour and we're in the slow lane. And as we get closer to the police car, we can see that it is stopped in the slow lane, blocking in the slow lane. It's not off the highway pulling someone over. We're going to have to go into the fast lane to go around it. So as we're approaching the back of the police car, Victor starts to change lanes, and someone from the other side, I don't know who it was, I felt hands grab my upper arms, clenching my upper arms, digging in, and I saw the shimmer of a face in front of my face, and they screamed, 10 miles an hour. And I was so freaked out that they touched me, and I saw the shimmer and the 10 miles an hour that I echoed that immediately to Victor and screamed, 10 miles an hour. He had just changed into the fast lane. The police car was maybe 50 yards in front of us. And before we got to the police car, he had slowed down to 10 miles an hour. So no policeman inside the car, no policeman anywhere near us. We passed the police car, and about, I don't know, 50 to 60 feet past the police car, then our lights finally lit up. The semi truck that had turned over on its side, and the cab of the truck was in the fast lane. The rest of the truck was across the slow lane and off the freeway, and we were heading directly to hit the cab of the truck. And that's where the gas tanks are. And because we were doing 10 miles an hour, Victor was able to swerve off the freeway to the left-hand side, off this gravel and through some small bushes and brush and stuff, and went around the front of the truck. And on the far side, I looked up out of my window, and the police officer was bracing with his legs against the wind, leaning over, talking to the truck driver through a broken pane of window in the truck. The truck driver was trapped inside, and the police officer was talking to him. And when he saw our lights coming around the front of the truck, he was like, had this face like like that. And then we just went slowly past where he was. Victor didn't know I saw him. And then Victor got back on the freeway again beyond the truck and started going down towards home. And I started immediately saying, thank you, God. Thank you for saving our lives. Thank you for saving the truck driver and the police officers' lives. I am yours always. And I'd already had my near-death experience, so I wasn't afraid of death or anything. And I said, if you want to take me anytime, I'm ready to go. I love you and I can't wait to be with you again. And if you want me to stay, then I am your servant here on earth. And you put somebody in front of me that needs help, and I will do everything that I can to help them. And so thank you so much. And I was just, saying that over. And then Victor finally looks at me and he goes, like 10 minutes down the road, he goes, Barbara, how is it that you just did that? If I had not watched that unfold, I never would have believed this story. How did you just do that? And I said, Victor, it wasn't me who did it. It was God who did it. And if you open up to him and you have your door open at all times, and you see a beautiful flower and you say, oh, isn't that beautiful? And you know that you're talking to him. Or, oh, I hope that person gets help over there, that homeless person. Or, oh, I hope these people, are having a good day today. Anything that you can say to him, and you talk to him and have yourself be open, your heart open to him, then he can talk and help send someone to help you when you need it, which is what happened today. And so I explained to him what, I'd been squeezed, that my arms had been squeezed, and I'd seen that shimmer face. And he was just astounded. He couldn't believe it. He does believe it, but it's just really a shock for him. And it's happened, those kind of things have happened all through my life. So I was at the IONS conference in 2009, and one of the speakers was PMH Atwater. And she was doing a talk about the after effects of near-death experiences. And she's just, a very interesting and fun lady. She's just amazing. She's had her own near-death experience. And I think she has a PhD. And so she was doing this talk about after effects, and I was in the talk listening. And I couldn't believe it because the things that she was saying I'd never heard before, but they were things that had been happening to me ever since I was a young child. And so I thought, how come I had the after effects before I had the near death experience? That doesn't make sense. So after her talk, I waited until everybody else had talked to her. And then I said, I've been having these specific after effects, precognition, and all the other aspects, way back to my childhood, earliest memories. So I'm not sure why, because I didn't have my NDE till I was 31. And she took my hands really gently and she looked at me very closely and she said, "My dear, if you've been having these specific after effects since you were a child, then you probably had something happen to you when you were a child that you were not told about or you do not remember. Please talk to your family about it and see if they can recall anything." And I thought, oh, I didn't make any face, but I thought, oh, brother, she thinks I had another one of these things when I was a child. No way, man. And so I thought about that during the conference. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to ask my older brother. My parents were deceased by then. And he lived up in Oregon. We were going to go up and visit him about a month later. And we were out to dinner. And I said, hey, Brad, I'm doing this little booklet I'm going to keep in my purse, because of my current husband Victor's cancer. I want to have information in there about that, who his doctors are and everything, and who our general practitioner is, and et cetera. And then I'm going to have my vaccinations on a page, and I'm going to have any surgeries I had, and then any accidents or anything. And so, do you remember anything from my childhood that I should put in there? And he said, no, not that I can think of. He's 10 years older than me. And so he would have been about 12 years old when this occurrence happened. And he went in, we went to dinner, we had a great time. And when we were leaving the restaurant, he put his hand on my arm and he said, "Barb, there is something I need to talk to you about. And I've always felt I should tell you, but the parents said never to talk to you about it. And they're gone now. And I feel that I should tell you that when you were 18 months old, you died from a high fever. I don't remember if you had flu or measles or mumps or what it was, but you went into convulsions and you stopped breathing and you turned soft purple. And Dad called the fire department, which is where you called for emergencies back then in 1958. And that makes me 69 years old now. And what ended up happening was that he ended up saying that my dad had been told to tell my mom to put me into tepid bath water because if I had a high fever and was very hot like that, that if she put me into cold water, it would cause shock. So my mom put me into a bathtub, put tepid water in, and then my brother ran over to the neighbors' houses to get more ice. And when he came back, he passed the bag of ice to my mom and he was telling me all this. And he said, "You were soft purple." And he said, "You were lifeless. Mom was crying over the top of you." And he said she started adding the ice to the water. And after about 2 minutes, all of a sudden, you went, "Ah!" And you took this deep breath in and then you started crying and you turned from purple to bright red again, which is what you had been before you turned purple. And he said, right then the ambulance pulled up in front of the house. And 2 minutes later, the ambulance people came rushing through the front door and they wrapped you up in a blanket and you were crying. And he said, "I was never so happy to see my bratty little baby sister crying." And so he said, that happened when you were, young, and I think you should, know about that. I always felt like I should tell you. So that's when I told him about my second near-death experience and blew his mind with that one. And so he's a total believer in near-death experiences. And it answered a lot of questions for me as to why I had, known what was going to happen before it happened. I knew when the phone rang when I was a child, I learned to stop, saying it, but I would say, Mom, it's Grandma, and she wants to talk to you about the cookie recipe you told her that she would, that you had. And so my mom would look at me like really crazy, like, who are you and where did you come from, And so I learned eventually to hide it. But oh, go ahead. Okay, a couple times it came out. One in high school when I ended up in front of three friends of mine, telling them what was going to happen. And it happened then. And they freaked out. And one of the friends started calling me a witch and broadcast that around my high school. So I had to deal with people coming up and saying, so and so, said that you were a witch. Are you a witch? No, I'm not a witch. And I don't know why I'm able to know what's going to happen before it happens, but I do. And so that happened. And then in high school also, I was riding my bike across the bridge. I was a photographer for a newspaper in Salem, Oregon, and I was an intern, and I was very proud of being chosen to do that as a female. And it was, the first female intern that they'd had. And I was riding my bike to go to work at the newspaper, and I felt this hand behind my head as I was crossing a bridge from West Salem to downtown Salem, and it was pushing my head down very strongly over my handlebars. And I was fighting this pressure on the back of my head, not knowing what was going on. I didn't want to look like a 10-year-old kid riding my bike, like a little kid. And I was pressing back against it, trying not to go down over my handlebars, but it was way stronger than me. And as it got me down over my handlebars, this big truck came lumbering up behind me. It had this extended side mirror, and the mirror actually brushed against the back of my head because my head was way down low. And the minute that it brushed over my head, then the pressure on the back of my head was gone. And I sat upright and I watched as that mirror receded, and I realized if I had been sitting upright, it would have hit me right in the middle of my back, and it would have knocked me off my bike and possibly into the tires of the truck. And that would have been damaging. And yes, God just helped me. And so I pulled my bike over on the bridge, faced the river so that the people going by on the bridge couldn't see me. And I burst into tears and I said, thank you, God. I really appreciate you helping me in this moment. And thank you so much for being in my life. Thank you. And I love you so much. And I just literally sat there for 10 minutes talking to God, and then recovered and stopped crying and went to work. And that evening, I had a boyfriend. I was in senior year of high school, and he's still a friend of mine to this day. And that evening when we went to dinner, I told him what happened, and he still remembers it to this day. And he and I are still friends. And he's, talked to my husband Victor, and I've talked to his wife Jenny, and we're all good friends. And so it's amazing that he, I told him about it, and he remembers it to this day. So lots of things have happened in my life where God has intervened, and I've realized it immediately that, without that intervention, I would have had a terrible situation occur. And I see how the different things were planted. I think even the bad guy was planted in my life to maybe learn some lessons. And I was moved to Santa Barbara, and I live here now, and I love my Santa Barbara. I have been here 40 something years, and I would have never met my current husband if I had lived in Oregon. So there was a reason that I had to be with the guy who was abusive, and I have forgiven him. When I see him because of our daughter, I can say, hi, how are you? Hi, and talk to his wife, and act as though everything's fine. um, I don't want to live with him, but I'm happy to be away. So lots of things have occurred. I started my IONS group in 2011, 2 years after I went to that first IONS conference. And at that first IONS conference, I was completely blown away. It was in San Diego, and there were 50 near-death experiencers that were in a large room. We sat in a huge circle, and there were other people outside the circle listening to us, and we each had 10 to 20 minutes to talk about our near-death experience. And I heard all of these other people firsthand talk about their near-death experience, and that's what opened me up to talking about my own near-death experience. And 2 years later, I realized, okay, I think my purpose, I think God planted that in my life to have me help others understand their near-death experiences and help others who haven't had them to learn from the near-death experiences of others. So I started the IONS group here in Santa Barbara, and it's been 14 years now. And other than during COVID, we didn't meet for a while during COVID, but I've had guest speakers come to Santa Barbara. Who doesn't want to come? Santa Barbara is such a pretty place. And so just had a beautiful guest speaker last night who is from Los Angeles, and she had a near-death experience. She was a Disney executive when she had her near-death experience, and she had kind of precognition and different things through her early life too. And she now is a medium based in Los Angeles, but internationally known. Her name is Hollister Rand. She's written 2 books, and she was my guest speaker last night. We had 100 people in presence. We don't do Zoom anymore after COVID was over. We just have an in-person meeting, and we had 100 guests last night. And I have it at a Unity Church here in Santa Barbara in their sanctuary. So it's a beautiful, beautiful location. And we just had the most wonderful time last night with her telling people, she was doing readings as she went through the audience and just blowing our minds with the things that she was bringing up on people's, not only people's deceased loved ones, but deceased animals. One friend of mine had her dog come through, and Hollister was able to talk about what the dog looked like and what food it liked and what it did. And this friend of mine was like, how would she possibly know that? Afterwards, when I talked to my friend, she was just flipped out. So it was just awesome, an awesome evening. So I've had Jeff Olson, Jeff O'Driscoll, Anita Morjani, Evan Alexander came twice, all the big wigs and all of the wonderful other people, wonderful, wonderful near-death experiencers of every category. And just I love what I do. I know that it's my life purpose and that God planted these things in my life so that I would do this, just like Dick is doing his group there. And it just feels so resonant with my heart. And I feel so happy that I get to do it. I feel blessed. So I hope this all helped everybody. And if anybody has any questions, you can feel free to ask them.
All right, I'm going to put the camera on gallery here so everybody can see
Okay.
present, and then we'll know who has a hand up and who would like to ask a question or make a comment. First on Zoom. Is there anybody on Zoom who would like to make a comment or ask a question? Okay, while you're thinking, then I'm going to open it up to people here in the room. Somebody here in the room have something to ask or a comment? Dawn says, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing.
When I do my talks, I call them The Amazing Life of a Double Dead Redhead. So I know I'm supposed to write a book, but I haven't done it yet. I'm kind of a busy girl. My current husband has had cancer for 34 years. Even prior to me meeting him, he didn't know it was cancer. It was misdiagnosed as psoriasis. So he's had cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. So I've marched him through 5.5 years of chemo, multiple rounds of radiation, PUVA therapy, all sorts of stuff. And now we're at Stanford University, has him in a CRISPR study. And they told him in April when we were there that he is the top out of 80 people in the study, has had the top best results from the DNA reprogrammed stem cells that they got from a donor, and they reprogrammed the stem cells to attack his specific type of cancer. And for 2 years after they gave him an infusion into his arm of the stem cells, they couldn't detect any cancer in his blood or his CAT scans or PET scans or anything. But then all of a sudden a rash came back. And so they got permission from CRISPR, the organization that oversees all these clinical studies, to do a second stem cell infusion. And it was twice as many of the DNA reprogrammed stem cells. And now it's now been 2 years since they gave us that second one. And we just went up there this week. They can't detect any cancer in his body. So they're going to watch him for another 8 years. And hopefully the cancer never comes back. But I think a positive attitude is perfect. And I think understanding that God's taking care of you and is helping you through. And he feels like he's a happy guinea pig because he feels that what he's doing with the clinical study is going to help other people in the future. So not only do I do the IONS group and help people in that way, but he is a happy guinea pig and helps with the clinical study at Stanford. So it's pretty cool. We know we were put together for a reason, and we feel very grateful to God for having done that.
Questions or comments from anybody on Zoom? I'm not seeing any questions or comments from anybody here in the room. Well, I have a question. Barb, you told another story about falling down the stairs.
Yes,
Could you tell that?
sure. So first I'll back it up with a little bit of pre-story. So when I worked at the University of California, Santa Barbara, in the Graduate School of Education, doing development fundraising with my wonderful boss, I helped get a $10 million donation for the Graduate School of Education and the Autism Clinic. So right after that had happened, and I was a big, hero on campus, I was volunteering all over the town, and I got this award of being an unsung heroine. One morning, I'm walking through my living room. My youngest son, the one that my husband and I had together, he's in third grade, and I go in to wake him up. Walk into and open his door and, say, "Come on, buddy, come on, time to wake up." And so then I shut his door and I'm walking through the living room. We have the window that's right behind me was open, and it's a beautiful view of the mountains behind Santa Barbara. We have this gorgeous view behind us. And I looked out the window, and all of a sudden it felt like two hands were touching the back of my head. Kind of like that pressure that I had on my bike, but this was just gentle, laying hands on my head. And I thought, uh-oh, am I having a stroke or something? That feels really weird. And so I reached up and I touched my head like this, and then nothing there, wasn't anything there. And I didn't feel like I was having a stroke or anything. So I brought my hands down and I had goosebumps all over my arms. And I thought, oh, what's going on? And so I thought, should I yell out to Victor? But that's going to scare the kids because my junior high school daughter was in the next room, as well as my third grade son. And so I thought, oh, what's going on? And all of a sudden, this big voice in my living room said, "You will have a scrapbook store." And I looked up at the ceiling and I said, "God, do you have the wrong house or wrong neighborhood today? Because I don't do any scrapbooking." It was right in the middle of the big scrapbooking industry thing in the United States. And I said, I don't do scrapbooking. And I don't know anything about retail stores. Do you have the wrong person today? And I'm like freaked out and I'm waiting for an answer and nothing came. So I went running through the house to my husband and I told him what happened. And my husband looked down at me and said, "I think that if you got that big of a message, You should see what it's going to take to get you there. Those were his exact words. And I looked up at him and I said, "Ah, I don't even scrapbook and I don't know anything about retail stores. And I love my job at the university and I don't want to go anyplace else. And we don't have any money to start a store. How can we do that?" And I'm looking up at him, waiting for him to say something. And the voice from the living room, swear to God this happened, spoke through my husband's mouth and said, "Barbara, you're the one that received the message." And I just went, he didn't know that that just happened. And I went like this and just was shocked and going, and I went over and sat on the bed and my hands were shaking and I was like, "Oh my gosh." And Victor came over and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm definitely not okay. And I'm probably going to be late to work today. And so just go ahead and feed the breakfast to the kids and just go ahead and go in without me because I'm going to need some time here to recover." And so he brought the kids in to say goodbye when they were leaving to go to, drop them off at school and everything. And I was sitting on the bed and I was praying and talking to God. And how could you want me to do something like this? I don't even know how to do this. I don't know what even step to take to move forward. I don't know what to do. Why would you tell me this? And I was just really upset and, I cried a little bit. And so finally I called my boss because I was late and I said I had an emergency. I left a voicemail for him and I said I had an emergency this morning. He totally loved me. He was such a nice guy. And so I'm sure that he didn't care. And so at 10 o'clock, I went into the university. Finally, I'd recovered. And so I got there and I was getting off at noon that day because I'd prearranged it because I'd been helping in another department and I'd been doing a little overtime. So I just, instead of getting overtime pay, I just took a half day off. So from 10 to noon, I sat there doing a couple of jobs in my office and I was talking to God the whole time saying, "I don't know why you'd want me to do this. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to step forward in this. And so you're going to have to help me. I don't know what to do." And so finally I got off at noon, went down to my car, and I was driving home. And right about 4 blocks from home, there's a fire station on a main street in downtown Santa Barbara. And I was stopped at a stoplight. And in my car, I hear, "You need to stop and ask about a business loan." I'm like, "Who are you people? Why are you telling me these things? I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Okay, I'll stop and ask about a business loan, but it does not mean I'm going to have a scrapbook store. So I pulled into my bank, which was only a block and a half later, and I went into the bank and I talked to a teller and I said, "Who do I talk to about a business loan?" And she points to a man and I walk over to him and I announce who I am. And he tells me to sit down, and then he announces who he is, and then he says, "What do you want to use your business loan for?" And I didn't want to say scrapbook store because I thought that was kind of dumb or something. I was like, "I'm thinking of opening a paper art store." And he goes, "Okay, and how much do you want to spend? How much do you was going to need to borrow to build the store?" And I looked at him and I went, "I don't know. How much do you think it's going to take to open a paper art store?" And he just rolled his eyes and just like, "What is this woman doing in here?" And he goes, "Mrs. Bartolome, you need to approach the bank when you have a business plan in hand." And I said, "Oh, well, I just began thinking about this process today. I will go and create a business plan and I'll come back. Thank you so much for your time. Goodbye." And so I got up and I started walking through the bank. And the voice from the car goes, "Now, wait a minute. You cannot give up that easily. You need to go back and ask someone else." And I said inside my head, "You're not making this easy on me. If you want me to talk to somebody and you know which specific person it is, why don't you show me who it is? Because there's the exit over there, and there's 4 people I'm walking through that corridor, and I will see all 4 of them. And if one of them is the right person, why don't you show me which one it is?" So I was getting kind of mad. It was like, I don't know. So I started walking towards the door. I looked at the first person, second person, third person. And the 4th person was a young man, 32 years old or 31, 32. I'd never met him before and I didn't know him. And when I looked at him, he looked up, he was writing something on his desk and he looked up, he jerked up and he went, and he smiled and waved at me. And I realized, oh gosh, I got to talk to that guy. So I backed up, went over to his door, and I said, "Hi, so I approached the bank today to ask about a business loan, but I realize now that I have to have a business plan, but I don't actually know what that consists of. I just started thinking about doing a business today. I'm kind of at the new stages here. Can you tell me what is in a business plan and like where I should go to create it? Is it a software program I should buy, or is it a city college course I should take? I don't know what to do." And he said, "Well, do you have your accounts here?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Okay, let me see your ID." So I passed him my driver's license, and he's sitting behind his computer desk terminal, and he starts talking about the first year build out of your business and the 5-year planning and your merchandise versus your display cases versus your employees and your, everything. He was going all over it. And I was listening intently, and he's got my driver's license and he's looking at his computer as he's talking. And then he goes, after about 10 minutes, he goes, "Mrs. Bartolome, can you hold on for just a moment? I'll be right back." And I said, "Sure." And so he goes down 2 cubicles. He's talking to a lady. They're all glass walls. I can see him talking to her. They look at her computer. He goes around the back of her desk and they're looking at her computer. And then he's talking to her again. And then he nods and he goes, and then he comes out of into the hallway and he starts approaching his office. And I think, gosh, I probably am taking up too much of his time. Maybe he has a meeting or something, an appointment. So I stand up and I say, I meet him in the hallway and I say, I'm sorry I've taken your time today and you probably have something better to do. I can make an appointment to talk with you. And he goes, "Mrs. Bartolome, you've just been approved for a $250,000 loan to start your store." And I looked at him and I said, "What?" And he goes, "Yes, you've just been approved." And I said, and he goes, "Will you and your husband come in tomorrow at 9 a.m. and sign paperwork for that?" And I said, "Do you mind if I call my husband? He's at the university." And he said, "No, not at all." I picked up my cell phone and I called my husband. I said, "Victor, you know what I was talking to you about this morning, the store that I was talking to you about? Well, I'm at Santa Barbara Bank and Trust, and they want to give me a $250,000 loan to open that store. Do you want to come in tomorrow and sign paperwork at 9 a.m.? And my husband said, "Sure." We went in and signed paperwork the next morning for $250,000. Now, the backstory on that is that when I moved into that apartment after I left the bad guy, I looked at 4 different apartments in the morning, and I put my husband off to the airport. I had kissed him goodbye at the airport, and I knew that that was my 1 week of opening to be able to get away from him safely. He was going to be gone a week to Montreal, Quebec, Canada. So I looked up apartments that were, my rent was going to have to be $800 a month because I didn't want to rely on any of his money. I wanted to be able to pay for it myself. And this was, clear years ago. Now there's no apartments in Santa Barbara at $800 a month, but I found 4 on the, I had actually found 5. And so I went to the first 4 and I told the people that were interviewing me and showing me the apartment, I'm getting out of a very abusive situation in a marriage and I am very much in danger and I've only been able to save up $800 and I don't have the security deposit for you. But if you will trust me, I will pay an extra $100 a month for the next 8 months and I'll pay you the security deposit. And I promise you I'll do that. And the first 4 people said, no, if you don't have both of them, you're not going to move in. So the 5th one, the last one of the day, I needed to go pick up my little daughter from preschool because otherwise I had to pay for every 15 minutes past the time that was the deadline to pick her up by. I had to pay money and I didn't have extra money. So this last one, the man showed me the apartment and I said to him the thing I had said to everybody else. And he stood and he looked at me for the longest time, just looking in my eyes. I was, my 30s. He was probably late 50s. And he just looked at me and he looked at me and he looked at me. And then he said, "Yes, you can move in." And I burst into tears because it was all this pressure and stress and strain. And I was scared. And I burst into tears and I said, why are you trusting me? The other 4 people that I interviewed with today didn't trust me. And I promise you, I will pay you the extra $100, even more possibly if I can, until I get the $800 deposit, security deposit paid off. Please, why are you trusting me? And he said, I grew up in the Netherlands during World War II. And a lot of Jewish people came to our front door running from the Nazis. And my parents opened our door and gave them food, a place to sleep overnight, extra coats or blankets that we had, food to take with them on their journey to get somewhere. He said, my parents helped every single one that knocked on our door. And today, when you told me the problem that you've been having, I saw the faces of those Jews in you. And I am going to do this to honor my parents. You are going to move into this apartment. And I just cried and hugged him, and I sat on the stairs outside and filled out the application that he wanted me to fill out. And I heard this noise upstairs, and I looked over my shoulder, and there was this elderly man in his 80s who was looking over the balcony. His apartment was upstairs, and he looked over and saw me down below, and then he came around to the top of the stairs and slowly came down the stairs. And when he got close to me, I turned and looked over my shoulder and I smiled. I'd been crying, and of course my makeup was yucky. And I smiled at him, and he said, are you going to move in? And he had a Latvian accent. He was from Latvia, and he was Jewish. And I didn't know that. And he said, are you going to move in? And I said, yes, I am. And he said, gut. And then he walked past me and he kept going. Well, I moved in and my 2 kids were with me, and we could hear him and his wife kind of bickering upstairs at the apartment upstairs. And she would say, Oscar, I told you I want some water. She was from Germany. Marie, I told you I'm doing the dishes. I'll be there in a moment. So I would hear these things and I thought, she never leaves the apartment. He goes out and gets the food. No one ever visits them. Their phone never rings. They don't have anybody. I don't have anybody. Oh. So I told my son and my daughter, she was about 4.5 by this time. He was 8 years older than that. And I said, hey guys, could you lay down on the floor and could you draw a picture together, flowers or sunshine or anything you want to draw? Just beautiful picture. Here's all the color crayons. Draw me a picture. Then I sat them down and I said, the elderly couple upstairs, I know would love to have this picture on their doormat. So Scotty, will you take Julie, go walk outside and find one single flower and then sneak up the stairs and put the picture and the flower on their doormat. So they did that and they loved it. So they started drawing pictures together on the floor. They would sit there and draw a picture, go outside, pick up a flower. They did it for like 3 months, at least 4 times a week. So then finally I see the elderly man outside and I'm getting into my car and he goes, excuse me, is it your children that are putting the pictures on our doorstep? And I said, yes, they want to be friends. And he said, would you consider coming up and having cookies and milk after school with us? And I said, we would love to. So I brought the kids up and brought the crayons and they laid on the floor and had cookies and milk and drew, and they told me their life story. He had been Jewish in Latvia. His whole family had been killed during World War II. He had gone to France to be helping his uncle with a company before the war broke out. And he joined the French army and was an artillery gunner until he got an exit from the army, with positive results with a piece of paper. And he showed it to a boat, and this boat took him down to near Casablanca on the African coast. And he went down there to avoid the Germans. And he met that wife who was a nanny for a rich family, and she was German, and they got married, and they'd been married 69 years by the time I met them. No children, no family left, nothing. And so I became their daughter, and my kids became their grandkids. And every time the kids would have something at school, I would pick. She never left the house, so she never left her apartment, never went anywhere. And so I would pick him up and take him to this kid's school, and he would watch the different things that the kids had going. And we would go up there, and we would fix dinner for them and take it upstairs and eat at their table. And we just became family. So Marie died first. She had a stroke and she was in the hospital 5 days. And I was sitting next to her bed, and Victor was taking Oscar downstairs to the place to eat something because he'd been sitting by her bed until we arrived there. And so we were all sitting next to her for the 5 days and holding her hand, and she was in a coma. And so I was sitting there holding her hand, and Oscar and Victor were downstairs and getting something to eat. And all of a sudden, she squeezed my hand, and I looked over at her, and she opened her eyes and she said very weakly, "I love you." And then she shut her eyes again and went back into the coma, and she died the next morning. So Oscar used to say to me in a joking way, "Barbara, I was married to her for 71 years. And the last person that she says I love you to is you." So Oscar lived another 10 years. I moved him into a facility that was for seniors so that he could have his food cooked for him and have somebody watching over him during the day when I was working. And every Sunday we had him over to our house for dinner or took him out to dinner. And at Christmas time, he loved mohair sweaters. So we would buy him, we had to save up for it because they were over $100, a beautiful mohair sweater for Christmas. We took him on our trips. We took him on travel vacations. We took him on a cruise. Man, he was part of our family completely. We loved and adored him. And everybody at the senior center really was jealous of him because he had this whole family that just, was loving him. So finally, one night, I called him at 7 p.m., talked to him like I always did, told him what I'd done during the day and everything. And at 9 o'clock p.m., I got a phone call from the senior center, and he had passed away. He'd had a heart attack and died within seconds. So my husband and I and our youngest little baby Tori was about 3 years old, our littlest child, little son. And so I went over, and the nurse watched Tori while Victor and I cried on Oscar's chest, and I, kissed his cheeks and told him how much I was going to miss him and everything. And about a week later, an attorney called me and said, "Your father has dictated that you're his executor for his estate." And I'm thinking, estate? Dad doesn't really have an estate. And so he said, "Well, I need to read the will to you. You need to come into my office." And I said, "Can I bring my husband?" And he said, "Yes, of course." So we went into this lawyer's office, not knowing what was going on. And he starts reading the will, and he says, "I, Oscar Seba, leave $100,000 to the Jewish Federation of Los Angeles." And my husband and I went, "He had $100,000? What?" And then the lawyer goes on, "I leave $100,000 to the senior center that he had just been living in for the last couple of years." What? I couldn't believe it. I was like, "What?" And then I leave $250,000 to my daughter, Barbara. So what did the bank see when I went into the bank that day when I was told to have the scrapbook store? They saw that I had taken 200,000 of that money, and I had paid down the mortgage of my husband's house so that it was part my house too. So then I felt like Dad had given me part of the house, and so that we lived here equally. Because before that, I felt like it was my husband's house and not mine. So I paid that $200,000 down, and I put $10,000 into 5 savings accounts for our 5 children, and told them it's for your college or it's for your first down payment on your first home. And that's from grandpa and grandma. And so that's what the bank saw when I walked in that day, was that I had done all that. So they gave me the $250,000. 3 months later, I opened up that store. It was so popular because it was the huge scrapbooking thing. And people would come from Los Angeles, 2.5 hours away, to come up here. People came from San Francisco on their way down to LA. I got to stop at your store. I've heard all this stuff about it. It's amazing. People would walk in the front door and go, "Oh my gosh, are you the owner? How did you ever think of doing this?" And I'd go, "Do you have a couple minutes? I have a great story as how I got this." And I used the story to help people understand God was willing to put all that together. So then, after 3 months of having the store, I actually was named Businesswoman of the Year for Santa Barbara, California. This is where Oprah lives. This is where, all these famous Los Angeles people that are Hollywooders. Okay, so I get named Businesswoman of the Year. I have to give a talk in front of 400 people at this big event at this big place that's Fess Parker's Red Lion. And at Fess Parker, I think you guys remember who Fess Parker is. Yes, so he owns this Red Lion. So the night before the talk, I had written up one talk telling about how I'd actually got the store, with the truth of you will have a scrapbook store included. Then the other talk I wrote up was just simply a thank you very much for this award. I'm very pleased to be awarded, blah, blah, blah. So I went to Victor and I said, I have this neutral talk that's not going to tell this truth about how I got the store. And I have this truth talk. What do you think I should do? And Victor looked down at me and said, "Barbara, I think if you're given these experiences, that they give them to you because you are brave enough to talk about them." So I got up in front of 400 people, the city council, the mayor, everyone the next day, told the whole story. Guess what? They all remember it because everybody cried. The whole 400 people were crying in the audience by the time I was done. And I felt really like, oh my gosh, did I hurt everybody? And everybody came up to me afterwards and hugged me and thanked me. And people on the streets would walk up, "Don't you own that scrapbook store? Oh, I was there when you got your award. Oh my gosh, you touched my heart." So the scrapbook store was a big, amazing thing. So what ended up happening was I had a Segway because I didn't want to drive the 4 blocks over to the scrapbook store. I didn't want to drive and have to deal with that. So I got a Segway and I rode the Segway over and back to the store each day. And it was, I still had the back issues, so I couldn't do a bike. So I would just stand up on my Segway, and it was really fun, and I would ride it back and forth to the store. Well, then the battery wore down and I needed a new battery, but I found out it was $2,500 for a new battery. So I wasn't going to spend that on the Segway. It's sitting down in the garage. But the Segway guy told me there was a new kind of Segway that was $800 and I could afford that. So I went down and got the new Segway, and I was only riding it for about the 7th time that I had kind of ridden it. It was a lot different than my Segway had been big and strong and serious like a police officer's Segway. Well, this one was kind of babyish, toyish, and I was getting used to it, and I fell off of it, and I fell onto my buns, and I didn't bounce. And unfortunately, I fractured my L1 vertebrae in my middle of my spine, and I was in severe pain. And my husband loaded me into our van in the center part where the seats had been taken out, and I laid, and he drove me to the hospital. And they told me, "You've got a L1 vertebrae fracture that's pretty major. We're probably going to have to do surgery on it. We're going to have you go home and lay down for 2 weeks. I don't want you getting up at all. I want you to stay in bed for 2 weeks seriously." And then we're going to talk to Los Angeles that did your spinal fusion surgery on your L5S1 vertebrae, because I ended up having another surgery down there and they fixed that area. And so we're going to talk to that doctor down there and see if he wants to do it or if we're going to do it up here or what's going to happen. And so I went home in severe pain, on pain pills, talking to God for 2 weeks, saying, God, I can't do all the things that you love for me to do down here if I'm going to be stuck in bed. I need you to help me with this, please. I need help as soon as possible. Please, I'm in such pain because I don't like to take pills, so I would avoid taking the pain pills and I would just lay there in pain. And so the day that I was allowed to get up, I had a tenant that I was going to be moving out, and so I needed to go over and look at her room that she had been renting in a little, in a place that we had on our property. And so I told Victor I was going to get up and he needed to come with me and we needed to look at her room. So it was upstairs in the property. And so I went up the stairs very carefully and slowly, and I wasn't having too much pain. I think I took a pain pill before I even went over or something. And so I went, looked around a room and said, it's beautiful. You did a great job with cleaning it up. Thank you. Gave her security deposit back again, and she left. And then I said, Victor, if you could just touch up the paint here and here and here. And then we started to go back down the stairs, and I was in front of Victor, and I was on the 5th stair up from the bottom. And it was into a room that was down there, carpeted at the bottom. And there wasn't a railing on the side of the stairs. It was an open staircase. And 1 second, I was on the 5th stair up, and the next second, I was laying on the floor across the room. No way I could have fallen from the stairs clear over there and not felt it. And I immediately thought, oh my gosh, I've probably hurt myself worse now. And I started crying. And Victor was leaning over me and, are you okay, Barbara? Are you okay? Are you okay? And I was like, no, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And so I'm panicking. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I don't feel any pain in my back. And I thought, did I sever my spinal cord? And so I moved my toes, and then no, I could move my toes. And I said, Victor, help me stand up. And he said, no, I don't think you should. I'm going to call the ER. I'm going to send an ambulance. And I said, no, Victor, help me stand up. And so he helped me stand up, and I kind of stood there for a second, and I kind of made this movement with my body, moving my spine. And then I shook my butt and I said, hey, guess what? It got fixed. I had a miracle. I'm fine. And Victor goes, Barbara, that's not possible. It's not. Oh, no. And I said, no, Victor, it is possible. I was asking for that. I'm okay. And so I went back to doing everything that I did. I wasn't at all in pain at all. No more pain pills, no nothing. I did dishes. I did everything, did around the house, vacuumed everything. And about a week later, the doctor from Los Angeles called me and said, Barbara, so I'm been talking to the Santa Barbara ER area and the doctors up there, and I think that we should have you come down here to do the surgery. And so we're going to have you do an ambulance down here. We're going to do a medevac, and And I said, well, actually, we don't need to do it anymore. I'm actually okay now. And he said, what? And I said, yeah, I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm walking around. I'm vacuuming. I'm doing dishes. I'm doing everything fine. I don't have any pain. Nothing. I'm not taking any pain pills. I'm fine. And he said, he just had this quiet time for about a minute, and he goes, Barbara, that's not possible. And I said, well, I said, okay, I'm going to level with you. I had a miracle from God. I said, I was praying the whole 2 weeks that I had to be in bed. I was praying for a miracle. I was praying for God to help me. And I said, I fell down off the stairs into our little room that's down below the stairs on the carpeting. And I said, I got up and I was fine. I said, I don't have any pain, no problems, nothing at all. That was like 10 years ago. I've never had any pain since then. I can carry 5-gallon bottles of water with no problem at all. I have had no updates, no problem. The doctor got off the phone with me by saying, well, if something happens to you, please call me. And I said, I sure will. but I never had to go back to any doctor or anything. I literally had a miracle in my house when I fell off those stairs. So, I can't even tell you how deeply and beautifully I believe in God, how much he's a part of everyday life for me. When I see things in my house that are beautiful, I've got an angel I'm looking at right now that's above my mantle. And every angel that I have in my house that I'm looking at reminds me of him. And I literally, have gotten so much help in my life that it's been amazing and beautiful and wonderful and incredible. And I just wish everyone knew that if you had the connection and you open the door and you talk to him and you feel that connection. I mean, I've had it since I was a child, and it just makes your life amazing. It's not that things don't happen. Like maybe something happens that's not fun, but I have a positive outlook in life, and so does my husband, because I've trained him to do it after 34 years of marriage. And my kids all understand it too. So, the cancer isn't a fear for us. We go up and take chocolates and wine to the doctors up there at Stanford, and we're loved. We're absolutely loved. So we don't have problems and fear and pain and worries. And yeah, we don't have that in our lives. We just thank God for all of the blessings that we have and keep on doing the positive stuff. So I help with people. I've got a little Jewish lady I'm helping right now that's 83, and she is on food stamps. And so sometimes when I'm out to dinner with my husband, I'll call her and I'll take her order and I'll bring her dinner from the restaurant. And sometimes I take her out to dinner and I drive her places when she needs to go get food at the grocery store, and I'll pay for it even. And I've been doing that for years now. Each person that I find that is somebody that needs me, then I'm there. And, I don't have a whole ton of money. It's not like I'm rich or anything. We're living basically on my husband's pension, which pays for our mortgage now, and our Social Security checks. That's it. So we're fine. We don't need a lot. We're happy, and we don't mind spending it on helping others. So that's kind of, keep focusing on that, guys. Keep helping other people and spread your wings and fly.
Wow.
Thank you, Barbara.
That was so rich. It felt like 5 hours.
Wow.
Any last
Sorry, you
comments?
guys.
Any last comments or questions from anyone?
Oh my God.
What happened to the store?
Oh, I had it for 6 years. Then the 2008-2009 recession started kicking in, and sales dropped from $1,000 a day to 400. And I couldn't keep my employees and pay them. And I started talking to God in the 5th year of having the store when the 2008 recession started. And I said, do you really want me to continue doing this? Do you want me to keep doing this? I can't tell if you want me to keep doing this, but I didn't get an answer. So in 2009, August 1st, I began a 1-month long sale at the store, and I started, a closing sale. And at the end of the month, I closed the store and I moved all of the stuff to our home. My husband built 5 sheds that are at the back of our property that still have all these boxes of scrapbook supplies, unopened stuff back there. I haven't had a chance because I'm always doing stuff. I work for the police department now. I volunteer at the police department here in Santa Barbara. And I just always volunteer everywhere and do things to help people. I've never even sold all that stuff that's back there. I guess my kids are going to have to do that at some point. It's probably worth a lot more now than it was back in 2009 when I moved it back there. But I moved out of the store, and that next month on Labor Day, actually Labor Day weekend, was when I was invited to go down to San Diego, to go to the IANS conference. So that completely one door closed, and literally within days, the next door opened and my near-death experience became the focus. And I opened the near-death experience group here in Santa Barbara just 2 years later, after I had acclimated to talking about my near-death experience. So the store closed and I did that. And then I opened the Santa Barbara 14 years ago. So that's how it all worked.
Hallelujah.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay,
Yeah.
Linda has a question. We have
Okay.
a camera on Linda.
Hi, Linda.
I don't know if it was you or Dick mentioned the YouTube interview with somebody Cheney.
Yes, that's oh darn it, it just blew out of my head. That is
Anthony?
Anthony, yes, Anthony Cheney. It's Chene. And also, there's another podcast by Twin Productions out of Los Angeles. And they had me come down to LA and they had a rented home. And we sat in this rented home and they filmed me. And that was really well done as well. And then also the third one that I really like is Jeff Mara, Mara. And he did a podcast there. I'm saying the same things in all of the podcasts. And I remember it really clearly. Sometimes when I'm talking about it and I'm up on the ceiling, if I shut my eyes, I can actually look down and see my body down below and see the nurse over there at the corner and see the two doctors leaning against the wall. And I can actually, it's that clear in my head still. And it's been 37 and a half years since it actually happened. So pretty awesome near-death experiences. Mine's a death experience, but we still call them near-death experiences. But you know, they're amazing, and the things that they've actually done research at the University of Virginia. I think it's the University of Virginia, yeah, I think it is. University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies did research, and those people that watch near-death experience podcasts or videos, or listen to them, or read about them, actually gain. They did a study on this. They gain the same benefits that the near-death experiencer got. So you don't have to have a near-death experience to gain the benefits. Just immerse yourself in them and you will gain those same benefits.
We have been
immersing
ourselves in it.
All right.
Yes, you have been. Yes, very beautiful.
You gave us many gifts.
Thank you. You're welcome. I hope to come to Virginia Beach and meet all of you at some future point. Yay.
All right. It's hard to say goodnight.
All right, but you guys got to go to bed. Okay.
Right.
Good night, everybody. Love you.
Okay. You.
Come to Santa Barbara and visit me.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Bye.